I wanted to be here to share with you something about our veterans who are very close to me. You know, I'm not going to talk about the usual things. I'm not going to talk about our great UVO, the banner program, our memorial, and all of the things that we see constantly in our community. What I want to focus on tonight is our veterans, and talk about America's veterans and Palmerton's veterans, and kind of share a message with you that is concerning to me, and I know a lot of my fellow veterans. You know, every week there's an announcement about a new cause that's being recognized, or sometimes it's a whole month dedicated to a cause, a group, or an organization. But the end result is veterans get one day. And we need to forget that and realize that veterans need to be honored and recognized at all times. So what I want to try to do with you tonight is talk about what is an American veteran. And so that we're on a common ground, I'd like to read to you exactly what the U.S. Code says about what a veteran is. The official definition is found in U.S. Code 38, Section 101. A veteran means a person who served in the active military, naval, or air service and was discharged or released under conditions other than dishonorable. Simple and clear. If they served honorably and were separated honorably, they're a veteran. That's the simple definition. Nothing more, nothing less. No requirement to have great awards, no requirement to have special recognition. Could be someone who has been decorated. It could be someone who served as a clerk. It doesn't matter. As long as they meet that criteria, they're a veteran. Now, to point that out, to distinguish to you that there's no difference in it, I'd like to talk about two World War I veterans from Palmerton. Does the name Elihu Kelton mean anything to anybody? Yeah, a couple people. How about Errol Sipe? Okay. Well, Lieutenant Kelton, who worked for the company, was a pilot in World War I. And he's rather famous in history. He's been written up in a number of aviation books. He worked here in Palmerton, lived here in Palmerton, and he flew in Europe. He was part of the 181st Aviation Squadron, and his claim to fame, believe it or not, he was their only pilot shot down. And that's why he's been written up in books. Not because he did anything brave, but he was the only one shot down. He was taken prisoner, and at that time, World War I, it was a different kind of German army, and they took care of him. They sent pictures home to his family to let the family know he was all right. And he continued to serve. When he got it back, he served in the Air Corps Reserve until the late 30s, and I think he achieved the rank of major. He happened to be my neighbor across the street, and I had a lot of lengthy conversations with him about his service. And one of the things he did is he kept in contact with the German pilot who shot him down until Hitler took over and the correspondence stopped. So he was kind of highly recognized and did something that you would say, well, he's clearly a veteran. Shot down, survived, got back. And at the same time, there was a man named Earl Sipe here in town who taught music, piano. Earl was a private in the Army, and he didn't really do anything. He just served his time. But the common denominator is they're both veterans. They both met the qualifications to be a veteran, whether it was being bravely shot down or just serving as a common ordinary private. So that's an example of it. But I also wanted to talk to you about how important it is that American and particularly Palmerton veterans, I thought, I want to talk about the average, the typical, the normal veteran. And then I thought about it, and none of those terms really apply. There's no such thing as a typical veteran, average veteran, or common veteran. They're all special. They've served their country. They've done something above and beyond. They were ready to give all if necessary. Now, at the same time, they learned some skill sets while they were there, and they bring those skill sets back to their communities, and their communities are better for them having had that experience. It can be technical, administrative, electronical, medical, or simply leadership. But they do bring skills back to it, and that's important. And sometimes whole families are committed. And I've picked out a few families that I want to talk about, or individuals. Now, there are surely a lot of other veterans in town I could talk about, but I picked a few at random that I think make my point. I'd like to talk about a family group, the Greenswide family. Claire was a World War II veteran, seriously wounded during his time in Europe with the Army. He came home, settled in the community, raised a family. His son, Justin, served in Vietnam. Justin married Barbara Greenswide. Now, you may know Barbara Greenswide as president of the Palmerton Cat Society. But Barbara was also an Army veteran. And their two sons are Army veterans. They've all served, a typical Palmerton family, committing the whole family to service. So you see that, and you recognize that that's part of it. So Claire and Justin, Barbara and the boys. And there are people who brought some business skills that they are now working in the community, enhancing the opportunities in the community. One person that comes to mind, and these are not people that stand out as active in our veterans group, but you all know of Joey Bees. Well, Chip Solt, he's a former Marine. And Bobby, his brother, was a Marine. Now, Bobby was very active in veterans organizations. Chip has not been, but he's bringing his skills into the community. I'm sure all of you go to the post office, and there's a nice young lady that works in the post office. Her name is Melissa. And I'm sure you've seen her smiling, helping you, selling you stamps, taking care of your packages. Melissa's an Air Force veteran that served in Afghanistan, but she's now serving her community. So she served her country, she's serving her community. These are examples of people who go about their daily living that we see day by day, and as we walk around, if we don't know them, or if they're not wearing a veteran hat, we don't really know that they've served. But we do know that they are among us, and their contributions make our communities even better. Many of you know Frank Johannes. Frank Johannes was a teacher, a coach, and the athletic director at Palmerton. Frank was also an Army veteran who served in the Army of Occupation in Germany. When Frank was there, things were not good in Germany. They were recovering, and there were a lot of issues. And he saw young people who didn't have a lot. And when he came back, that stayed with him. And he recognized how important it was to help people. So as a coach, he ran across several players who had problems buying sneakers. So he bought them up for them out of his own pocket. And when they had road trips and they stopped for something to eat, some of the students didn't have money. So again, he bought them something to eat. He made sure when he became athletic director that the budget always covered all the equipment that students needed, and that meal money was always available for every sport. So things he picked up and learned in the service, he brought into the community. Many of you know Willard Steigerwald. He was our police chief many, many years. And I guess I have to say he was chief in a quieter time in Palmerton, when not as much crime and activity existed. You may know that Willard was a World War II veteran. But how many of you knew that the whole time he was our police chief, he was an Army criminal investigator. He had a dual role. He was a CID agent for the Army the whole time he was chief of police in Palmerton. I knew Willard and I knew about his assignment. Not a lot of people did. And every once in a while, Willard would disappear from town. And he'd come back and I'd stop in the station. I'd say, Willard, missed you. Oh, well, there were some weapons missing at Fort Dix. Had to look into it. Or there was a problem at Toby Hanna. Or a couple issues developed in D.C. So he continued to serve his country and his community at the same time. When he retired, at his retirement, the chief criminal investigator for the total Army came to recognize him, because at that time, he was the longest credentialed CID agent in the Army. Most people didn't know that, and he didn't want people to know about it. He served his community and he served his country. And of course, our current chief of police, Cromer, is an Army vet as well. Many of you know Bill Gallagher. Bill was a Vietnam veteran and an officer. He brought his skills that he had as an officer back. He served here in Palmerton as our mayor. He has served now as a councilman. So he's been involved in both his government locally and as well nationally. But these are kind of some of the people. I could go on and talk more about them, but I thought I would just share with you some of these ideas about every day as we go about our daily routine. We're shopping in a grocery store, a doctor's appointment, we're going to the post office, or wherever we might be going. We pass veterans that we don't know, who are just part of the community, who are serving, helping people, living their lives, raising their families, and helping to grow our community to be a better place than it is. And that's so important to recognize. And it goes across the country. It's not only here in Palmerton, but it's across the country. And every day we see that those people who have made these sacrifices do the kinds of things that are so important for all of us. If you have relatives that are veterans, family members, or even neighbors, be aware of the fact of how things are going for them. They could be fine, they could be perfect, and that's most of them. But there are some that may be having issues, and they need to get our support and help. And if you see those people, make sure that they get assistance from the VA. Make sure that their family is aware of it and not just accepting it and saying, oh, well, that's what Dad's like now. He's different. Well, why is he different? Look into it. Get the necessary help for him. Unfortunately, as you may know, Carbon County per population has the highest suicide rate of veterans in the entire state. It's a problem that's being dealt with. I think our Veterans Affairs Office does an excellent job to try to do things for them and to help them. There's a new clinic that's open. The assistance is there, but people have to be made aware of it. Our Veterans Outreach Program provides food for the needy veterans. We have a lot of veteran families that are receiving monthly food donations because they are up against things. These are the people who have served, who sacrificed, who need to be recognized, not just one day a year, but every day, and helped when needed, because they were there to help us, defend us, protect us when their time was there. And it really doesn't matter, as I've said, I don't care whether a person is highly decorated or if they did nothing but be a filing clerk. And that doesn't mean that in a negative way. It simply means every job they did was important for the defense of our country, and it was necessary, and it's critical. Along with that, I think it's important that veterans' history not be forgotten. If you have a veteran in family, get them to record, write down some of their experiences. Don't need all the details, but something to pass on to future generations about what they've done, what their experiences were like, because that's part of the family heritage and history. I can't tell you how many military funerals I've been at where I've heard the family say, gee, I wish I knew more about Dad and what he did in the military. They never asked, Dad never offered. It's got to be an outreach program where the family has to step forward and say, we need to record this, we need to pass this on. I've helped people, they've come to me and called and said, how do I find out more about my dad's service? And of course I refer them to the Veterans Affairs Office for assistance. In some cases they can be helped, others they can't. I actually have a retired military veteran whose parents served, who came and said, I don't really know what my parents did in the war. And she's trying to research now and find out what they've done. So before it's too late, gather information, whether it's a parent, a brother, a sister, record it, pass it on for future generations. Now I say that kind of a little bit of guilt. I had a couple years ago, one of my daughters came and said, Dad, here's a blank book. It's a journal. Write down some things you've done. We don't remember it all. Now, when they were young, our daughters actually experienced life on military bases, and they knew what it was like, and they had the opportunity to see what it was like on military bases and several different ones in the country. But as they grew up, it kind of became it was part of their life, but it was in the shadow. And all of a sudden they said, you know, we don't remember all the things that you did. You know, we know you disappeared and you were deployed and you came back, and we know you've got a whole bunch of ribbons, but we don't know what they mean and we don't know what they stand for. So would you jot down some of that? And as a result, I did. It's been passed on now to our grandchildren and our great-grandchildren. Our great-grandsons talk about me at school, and that's important. So think about it and get some information and record it. So let me stop there. And does anybody have any questions? Question?
What made you decide that you wanted to go into the military?
Well, I had two uncles in World War II who served, and for some reason I always thought that was something I wanted to do, and it was important, and it turned out to be very important. It shaped a great part of my life, and it was a great experience. I wouldn't have missed it for anything. Well, it's time to stop talking when you stop listening. Anything else? Well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be here.